We're gonna cover a very important topic when learning JavaScript, which is data fetching. And the first topic we're gonna discover is what is data fetching. So when you're thinking about data fetching, I want you to think about YouTube, right? Like you refresh YouTube, you go to youtube.com, and the first thing you see is this loading screen. I'm gonna put it again, this loading screen, and then you have the videos. The videos itself have some information, which is the thumbnail, maybe the title, maybe the author, the number of views, and the post date. In this case, when we are having this load of the website, the following is the flow. So first we enter to youtube.com, yeah, and then YouTube will talk to a computer somewhere in the world with the information that we have. In this case, we can call it a database, or a fancy word for that will be an API. The flow will be the following. YouTube asks for information, and then the databases return some information. So this process of making these requests and handling all over the internet and with a programming language is called data fetching. How do we do that? Well, before we give you code and tell you how it's done, I will prefer to tell you when it should be done. So that topic is called data fetching timing. And there is two concepts that I like to cover here, which is synchrony versus asynchrony. These are not programming language or like programming related. These are concepts that we see in general life. So what is asynchronous versus asynchronous tasks? Well, what I like to do to explain this topic is very simple. Let's say that you're hungry, and then you go to a pizza place. In this pizza place, my drawings are not the best. I do apologize for that, but let's say in the pizza place, you can make your order and you say, hey, I want some pizza. Okay, the pizza place will say, okay, there you go, here is your pizza. But this response of making the pizza is not immediate, right? Like how long it will take to make a pizza? 10, 15 minutes. So instead of, waiting and doing nothing while you get your pizza, then you can do other stuff, right? You can call your friends, you can talk, you can, walk around a little bit, but you don't have to necessarily hold still until you get your pizza. That will be crazy. But if you decide to do other stuff, well, then you're doing several things at the same time, right? You will be calling your friend, you will be, walking, maybe also waiting for a pizza, and those processes are run simultaneously, okay, on the same timeline. And what I like to mention also is that they don't necessarily have to wait to each other to continue to the next topic or like to the next tasks, right? For example, if you are waking up in the morning, the first thing you have to do is, wake up. Then you have to put your shoes. Then you have to brush your teeth. In this case, the processes need one to finish and for the next one to continue. So as you probably are guessing by now, this waiting for one process to finish is called synchronous process, and when you're not waiting for a process to finish, it's called an asynchronous process. This is very powerful because especially when you're doing data requests like data fetching, we don't want to wait for our information to be returned or ready in order to do other activities. That means, for example, that we will do a lot of asynchronous tasks in JavaScript when fetching data. How do we do that? Well, that's actually the next topic. Data fetching in JavaScript. So how does that work? Well, JavaScript makes a really simple job to give us the way of fetching information, and this is using the function fetch. And this is a built-in function. If I copy paste this function and I paste it on my browser, it will, tell me an error that I need to provide an argument, but this function is defined. So that's pretty cool. It means that by default, JavaScript in the browser provides me the way of making these fetch calls, or like this data fetching information by default. It's already included in the language. So how does this fetch works? Well, we can check the documentation. I really like the W3 Schools website because they have a nice example, and they have a very nice set of like explanation on how everything works. But we're gonna cover it also in this video. So the way it works is we need to write the word, or like the function fetch, open and close parentheses, and then between commas we need to put the address we want to visit. In this case, we could just start by google.com. When we do this, when we fetch google.com, I'm gonna copy paste this in my browser, like this. I get an error, and that is because I need to provide the secure connection, which means HTTPS, and it kind of works. We'll see the error in a minute. We have a course problem, that's not important, but I want like the fact that we're able to do this fetch and getting an error. This is from Google, the error is from Google, it's okay, but that means that it is working. So when we're doing this fetch, what we're doing with the programming language, with JavaScript, is literally going to google.com and getting this HTML that we're seeing in the screen, this HTML that we're seeing in the console, we're getting it inside of our code, inside of our program. But most of the time we don't want to have HTML because when we're doing this data fetching, we want to do it for data processing. We want to get some objects, some arrays that has information about a particular subject. Some example that I really like is this Pokemon API, which will return me. I'm visiting this website and it's returning me an array of Pokemon. Okay, so I could have a visual representation in HTML of the Pokemons, or I could just have an array of objects that describe the Pokemons. So this one is the thing that I care the most. So instead of fetching to google.com, could fetch, for example, to this array of Pokemons, and that should be enough. Now, how do we complete this fetch call? Well, in JavaScript, as we mentioned, we have a lot of asynchronous processes. And if we visit again the page of W3 School about promises and fetch API, we'll see that the fetch method returns a promise. That means that the promises are asynchronous calls. And in this case, we need to use the word then for handling these promises. And then we need to provide a function. That means I need to provide an action to do after my fetch is finished. So in this case, we're gonna receive a response, and then we're gonna transform this response to a JSON, it's lowercase. We're gonna transform this response to a JSON object. Single P, perfect. This is not much to think about. It's part of the library fetch specification. It's part of the way it should be handled. Some other libraries like Axios don't require you to do this transformation, but in this case, fetch requires you to do it. Finally, after we transform to this information, we have access to this JSON. We have to provide another then because this is also returning a promise. And then we can finally log whatever we want to show on the console. In this case, the JSON of all the Pokemons. Again, all this information that I show pokeap.co b2 Pokemon, this whole information will be available on my JavaScript program. So that takes me to my next and final topic, is how do I do this data fetching in React? In this case, the easiest way to do it is just come to a React component. I have my terminal already open, so I'm just gonna start my React project. And then I'm gonna go to the app.js, which is literally the first React started package, and it should display this nice screen. I'm gonna delete all of that, and I'm gonna add a simple hello world. And there you go. So the data fetching could be done literally here in my React component like this, outside of the return, because that is not part of the logic and JavaScript that I want to have. And if I refresh this, and I open my console, I will see that I have a JavaScript object on my console, which is the results of the API call. So that's how I do it. That's literally it. A final tip for you guys: don't do this because this is very inefficient. Every code that we have outside, not wrapped in we will see in a particular hook, will be called whenever something on my component changes, like a property or state. So it's a really good practice to wrap these calls literally in something called use effect. That's telling React, don't execute this function all the time, just execute it with something changes. And then we can provide the thing to check when something changes. Then in this case, we don't want to wait for something to change. We just want to have it when the component is mounted for the first time, one time. So that's why we put an empty array. After that, we will paste this logic to fetch information. We will refresh, and there you go. It's the same thing. Literally, we have the same result, but this is way better because the fetching will be just be happening one time. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoy and you will learn how to make this data fetching in React. Remember that we saw these 4 topics: how to do it in React, which is using the use effect, how to do it in JavaScript with the fetch function. We also saw when to do this data fetching, where we have the synchronous versus the asynchronous model. In this case, in JavaScript, we have the asynchronous model, and we have the concept in general of data fetching, which is literally getting information about something in somewhere. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you soon.